Juliet, a 28-year-old single mother, takes her 6-year-old daughter Emma to a family dinner at her grandparents' house in a small Ohio town. What should have been a peaceful family gathering turns into a nightmare when her mother's new boyfriend physically strikes Emma for making too much noise during the meal. When Juliet's parents minimize the incident and even laugh about it, she makes a decision that will forever change the family dynamic. She calls her lawyer that very night. The story explores themes of child protection, family boundaries, maternal courage, and the legal and emotional consequences of standing up for what's right, even when it means confronting your own family. The October evening air in Millbrook, Ohio, carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves as Juliet Martinez pulled her blue Honda Civic into the familiar gravel driveway of her childhood home. The two-story colonial house stood exactly as she remembered it. White picket fence, manicured lawn, and the same ceramic garden gnomes her mother had collected for over 2 decades. Through the warm glow of the kitchen window, she could see her parents moving about, preparing for what her mother had insisted would be a perfect family dinner. "Mommy, are we gonna see Grandma and Grandpa?" Emma's excited voice piped up from the back seat, her small hands pressed against the car window as she peered at the house with wide brown eyes that mirrored her mother's. "Yes, sweetheart. And remember what we talked about? We're going to meet Grandma's new friend, Frank," Juliet said, adjusting the rearview mirror to get a better look at her daughter. Emma was dressed in her favorite purple dress with butterfly patterns, her dark hair pulled back in 2 neat braids that had taken Juliet 20 minutes to perfect that morning. Juliet had been dreading this dinner for weeks. Ever since her mother, Patricia, had announced she was dating again after her father's retirement, family dynamics had shifted. Patricia, 58 years old and recently rediscovering her social life, had been gushing about Frank Morrison, a 62-year-old retired construction foreman she'd met at her book club. According to Patricia, Frank was a real man's man who doesn't take nonsense from anyone. The description had made Juliet's stomach turn. As a single mother who had worked tirelessly to create a safe, nurturing environment for Emma after her ex-husband's abandonment 3 years ago, Juliet had learned to trust her instincts about people. Something about her mother's glowing descriptions of Frank's no-nonsense attitude and old-school values had set off alarm bells. "Come on, baby girl, let's go meet everyone," Juliet said, unbuckling her seatbelt and grabbing the bottle of wine she'd brought as a peace offering. She'd chosen a mid-range Cabernet Sauvignon, hoping it would help smooth over any potential tensions. The front door opened before they even reached the porch steps. Patricia Martinez emerged wearing a floral dress that Juliet had never seen before, her graying hair styled in a way that took 10 years off her appearance. Behind her stood a tall, broad-shouldered man with thinning gray hair and arms that spoke of decades of manual labor. "Juliet! Emma! Come here, my darlings!" Patricia's voice carried a forced cheerfulness that Juliet immediately recognized. Her mother always overcompensated when she was nervous about something. Emma broke free from Juliet's hand and rushed toward her grandmother, who scooped her up in a dramatic hug. "Grandma, I missed you so much." "Oh, sweetheart, I missed you too. You've grown so much since last month." Patricia's eyes sparkled as she spun Emma around, and for a moment Juliet felt some of her tension ease. Whatever reservations she had about tonight, her mother's love for Emma was genuine and unwavering. Frank stepped forward, extending a calloused hand toward Juliet. "You must be Juliet. I'm Frank Morrison. Your mother's told me a lot about you." Juliet shook his hand, noting the firm grip that bordered on aggressive. "Nice to meet you, Frank. Mum's mentioned you quite a bit." Frank's grey eyes studied her with an intensity that made Juliet shift uncomfortably. There was something assessing in his gaze, as if he were measuring her worth. "And this must be the little princess I've heard so much about," he said, turning his attention to Emma, who was still in Patricia's arms. "Emma, say hello to Mr. Frank," Patricia prompted gently. Emma, naturally shy around strangers, buried her face in her grandmother's shoulder. "Hi," she whispered, barely audible. Frank's expression hardened slightly. She's a quiet one, isn't she? Kids these days don't know how to speak up properly. Juliet felt her protective instincts kick in. She's just shy at first. Once she gets comfortable, you won't be able to get her to stop talking. We'll see about that, Frank said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Inside the house, the familiar scent of Patricia's famous pot roast filled the air. The dining room table was set with the good china that only came out for special occasions, complete with cloth napkins and fresh flowers from the garden. Robert Martinez, Juliet's father, emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter of roasted vegetables. "There's my girl!" Robert's face lit up as he saw Juliet. At 60, he was still the gentle, soft-spoken man who had taught Juliet to ride a bike and helped her with homework every night. "And my favorite granddaughter. I'm your only granddaughter, Grandpa." Emma giggled, finally coming out of her shell as she hugged her grandfather. "That's what makes you extra special," Robert winked, ruffling Emma's hair. "How's kindergarten going, sweetheart?" As Emma launched into an animated description of her art class and her new friend Katie, Juliet observed the dynamics around the table. Her parents seemed genuinely happy, more relaxed than she'd seen them in years. Frank sat at the head of the table, Robert's usual spot, and her father didn't seem to mind the displacement. Patricia bustled about, ensuring everyone had enough to eat, while casting frequent glances at Frank for approval. "So, Juliet," Frank said, cutting into his pot roast with deliberate precision, "Patricia tells me you work at that marketing firm downtown." "Yes, I'm a digital marketing coordinator at Henderson & Associates. It's challenging work, but I enjoy it." "Marketing, huh? Making people buy things they don't need?" Frank's tone carried a hint of derision. "I always preferred honest work, building things with your hands, creating something real." Juliet felt her jaw tighten. "Marketing is about connecting people with products and services that can improve their lives. It's not about deception." "If you say so," Frank shrugged, returning to his meal. "I suppose someone has to do it." The conversation continued in similarly uncomfortable territory, with Frank making subtle jabs at Juliet's career choices, her decision to raise Emma alone, and what he perceived as modern society's moral decline. Patricia seemed oblivious to the tension, laughing at Frank's jokes and agreeing with his opinions, while Robert grew increasingly quiet. Emma, meanwhile, was being her usual 6-year-old self. She chattered about her day at school, asked questions about the food, and occasionally knocked over her water glass while gesturing enthusiastically. Each time, Juliet quickly cleaned up the mess, but she noticed Frank's increasingly irritated expressions. "Emma, remember to use your inside voice," Juliet gently reminded her daughter when her excitement over dessert caused her voice to rise. "But Mommy, I'm just happy. Grandma made my favorite cookies." Emma's joy was infectious, and Robert chuckled at his granddaughter's enthusiasm. "Kids should be seen and not heard during dinner," Frank muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Juliet felt her protective instincts surge, but before she could respond, Patricia jumped in. "Oh, Frank, she's just excited. You know how kids are." "I know how kids should be," Frank replied, his voice carrying a warning edge. "Respectful, quiet when adults are talking." The tension in the room was palpable. Emma, sensing the shift in mood, grew quieter and moved closer to her mother. Juliet wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulders, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Frank. "Maybe we should talk about something else," Robert suggested diplomatically, but his suggestion was met with an uncomfortable silence. As Patricia brought out coffee and her famous chocolate chip cookies, Emma's excitement returned. She bounced slightly in her chair, telling her grandmother about a drawing she'd made at school. "And then I drew a rainbow, and Mrs. Peterson said it was the most beautiful rainbow she'd ever seen. And I told her about how you taught me to draw clouds, Grandma, and, good Lord, does this child ever stop talking?" Frank's voice cut through Emma's story like a blade. Emma's face fell, and she looked confused, her small hand reaching for her mother's. Juliet's heart broke seeing her daughter's joy extinguished so abruptly. She's just sharing her day with us, Juliet said firmly, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. She's being loud and disruptive. Children need to learn respect. She's 6 years old, Frank. She's being a normal, happy child. Frank's eyes narrowed. Maybe that's the problem. Too many parents these days don't know how to discipline their children properly. The room fell silent. Patricia looked between Frank and Juliet nervously, while Robert's expression grew troubled. Emma, sensing the adult's tension, had stopped talking entirely and was now clinging to her mother's arm. "I think Emma's been perfectly well behaved," Juliet said, her voice carrying a warning of its own. "She's excited to be here with her family." "Well behaved?" Frank scoffed. "She's been chattering non-stop, spilling things, and disrupting the entire meal. In my day, children who acted like this faced consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Juliet asked, her protective instincts now in full alert. Before Frank could answer, Emma, trying to lighten the mood the way children do, piped up again. "Grandma, can I have another cookie? Please? They're so yummy." It was an innocent request, delivered with the kind of enthusiasm that usually melted hearts. But Frank's face darkened with an anger that seemed completely disproportionate to the situation. "That's enough," he said, his voice low and menacing. And in that moment, Juliet knew with absolute certainty that this dinner was about to take a turn that would change everything. The silence that followed Frank's menacing words seemed to stretch forever. Emma, confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere, looked around the table with wide, innocent eyes. She didn't understand why her simple request for a cookie had made the tall man so angry. "Mr. Frank, I was just asking nicely like Mommy taught me," Emma said in her small voice, the words barely above a whisper. Frank's jaw tightened. "I said that's enough." Juliet felt every maternal instinct in her body screaming danger. She pulled Emma closer to her side, the protective gesture instinctive and immediate. "Emma, baby, you're fine. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't coddle her," Frank snapped, his voice rising slightly. "This is exactly what's wrong with kids today. No discipline, no consequences, just endless coddling." Patricia, who had been frozen in shock, finally found her voice. "Frank, please, she's just a little girl." "A little girl who needs to learn respect," Frank interrupted, standing up from his chair. The movement was sudden and aggressive, causing Emma to shrink further into her mother's side. Robert, who had been silent throughout the escalating tension, finally spoke up. "Frank, I think maybe we should all just take a deep breath here." "Do take a deep breath?" Frank's voice was getting louder now, and Juliet could see Emma starting to tremble. "This child has been disrupting our entire meal with her constant chatter, her spills, her demands. And instead of teaching her proper behavior, you're all enabling her. She's 6 years old." Juliet's voice was steady but firm. "She's behaving exactly like a normal 6-year-old should behave. She's excited to be with her family, she's sharing her day, and she's being polite. If you have a problem with that, the issue isn't with her." Frank's face turned red. "Are you telling me how to judge behavior in my own—" "This isn't your house," Juliet interrupted, her voice cutting through his bluster. "This is my parents' house, and Emma is their granddaughter. She has every right to be comfortable here." "Juliet, please!" Patricia started, but Frank held up his hand to silence her. "Your mother invited me here, which makes me a welcome guest. And as a guest, I have the right to expect a peaceful meal without being subjected to a child's tantrum." "Tantrum?" Juliet's voice rose in disbelief. "What tantrum? She asked for a cookie." Emma, overwhelmed by the shouting and sensing the anger directed at her, began to cry. They weren't loud sobs, just quiet tears rolling down her cheeks as she pressed her face against her mother's arm. "Great, now she's crying," Frank said with disgust. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. No emotional control, no discipline. She's crying because a grown man is screaming at her for no reason." Juliet stood up, pulling Emma with her. "That's enough. We're leaving." "Sit down," Frank commanded, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the room freeze. "You're not going anywhere until we finish this conversation." "Excuse me?" Juliet's voice was dangerously quiet. "You heard me. Your daughter needs to learn that her behavior has consequences, and you need to learn how to be a proper parent." Emma's tears were flowing freely now, and she tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, I want to go home. I'm scared." "We're going, baby. Right now." Juliet bent down to pick up Emma, but Frank's voice stopped her. "I said sit down, now." The command was delivered with such force that even Robert jumped. But Juliet had reached her limit. She straightened up, her eyes blazing with protective fury. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me or my daughter again. I'll raise my voice however I want to, whoever I want," Frank shot back. "And if you can't control your child, someone else will." "What did you just say?" Juliet's voice was deadly quiet. Before Frank could answer, Emma, in her innocent 6-year-old way, tried to diffuse the situation. "I'm sorry, Mr. Frank. I didn't mean to make you mad. I'll be quiet now." Her small voice, thick with tears and confusion, should have melted any reasonable adult's heart. Instead, Frank's expression grew even more severe. "It's too late for apologies. You've already ruined everyone's dinner with your behavior." "She didn't ruin anything," Juliet exploded. "She's been nothing but sweet and polite all evening." "Sweet and polite?" Frank laughed bitterly. "She's been loud, disruptive, and demanding. And instead of correcting her, you've been encouraging her." Emma, desperate to make the scary man stop being angry, slipped away from her mother's side and approached Frank's chair. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Frank. Please don't be mad at me anymore." Juliet watched in horror as her daughter, in her innocent attempt to fix the situation, moved within Frank's reach. Every instinct screamed at her to grab Emma and run, but she was frozen by the surreal nature of the moment. "Emma, come back here, sweetheart," she said, her voice gentle but urgent. But Emma, in the way that only children can, was determined to make things right. "I promise I'll be good, Mr. Frank. I won't ask for any more cookies." Frank looked down at the small girl standing beside his chair, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. For a moment, Juliet thought she saw his expression soften, thought maybe he would remember that he was dealing with a child. She was wrong. "You want to promise you'll be good?" Frank's voice was low and menacing. "Then you need to understand that actions have consequences." And before anyone could react, before Juliet could move, before Robert could intervene, before Patricia could speak, Frank's hand shot out and connected with Emma's cheek in a sharp, ringing slap. The sound echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Emma's scream pierced the air, a sound of pure shock and pain that would haunt Juliet's dreams for years to come. The little girl stumbled backward, her hand flying to her reddening cheek, her eyes wide with disbelief and terror. "Oh my God!" Juliet's voice tore from her throat as she lunged forward, scooping Emma into her arms. "You hit my baby! You hit my baby!" Emma was sobbing hysterically now, clinging to her mother with desperate strength. "Mommy, he hit me! Why did he hit me? I was just saying sorry!" Juliet's entire body was shaking with rage and shock. She held Emma tight, her hand gently checking the red mark on her daughter's cheek. "I know, baby, I know. Mommy's got you. You're safe now." "She needed to learn," Frank started to say, but Juliet whirled on him with fury she didn't know she possessed. "Don't you dare!" she screamed. "Don't you dare try to justify hitting my child!" "Juliet, please. Calm down," Patricia said, her voice shaking. "Let's all just calm down." Juliet's voice cracked with emotion. "He hit my 6-year-old daughter. He hit Emma." Robert was on his feet now, his face pale with shock. "Frank, you can't hit a child like that." "She was being disrespectful," Frank said, his voice still cold and unapologetic. "Sometimes children need to learn lessons the hard way." "She's 6!" Juliet screamed, tears streaming down her face. "She was trying to apologize to you. She was scared and trying to make you feel better, and you hit her." Emma's sobs were heartbreaking, muffled against her mother's shoulder. "I want to go home, Mommy. I want to go home right now. We're going, baby. We're leaving right now." Juliet turned toward the door but stopped when she heard Patricia's voice. "Juliet, wait. Let's talk about this rationally." Juliet turned back, her face a mask of disbelief. "Rationally?" He just assaulted my daughter." "It wasn't assault," Frank said calmly. "It was discipline, something she clearly needs more of." "Get out!" Robert's voice boomed through the house with an authority Juliet had never heard from her gentle father. "Get out of my house right now!" But Frank didn't move. He sat back down in his chair, his expression smug. "Patricia invited me here. I'm not going anywhere." Patricia looked between Frank and her family, her face a picture of confusion and distress. Maybe we should all just calm down and talk about this." Juliet stared at her mother in complete shock. "Talk about this? Mum, he hit Emma. He hit your granddaughter." "I know, sweetheart, but maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe Emma was being a little difficult and Frank just what?" Juliet's voice was raw with emotion. "Just what, Mom? Just decided to assault a 6-year-old child." "It was a slap on the cheek," Patricia said weakly. "My parents used to do that to me when I misbehaved. It's not like he really hurt her." The words hit Juliet like a physical blow. She stared at her mother, seeing her in a completely different light. "She has a red mark on her face, Mom. She's sobbing. She's traumatized." "How is that not hurt? Children are resilient," Frank said from his chair, as if he were discussing the weather. "She'll be fine in a few minutes." "She'll be fine." Juliet's voice was barely controlled. "She'll be fine. You think traumatizing a child is something she'll just get over?" Emma's sobs had quieted to hiccups, but she was still clinging to her mother like a lifeline. "Mommy, can we go home now? Please. I don't like it here anymore." "Yes, baby, we're going home right now." Juliet looked around the room at her family, her mother, who was making excuses for a man who had just hit her granddaughter, her father, who was standing helplessly by, and Frank, who was sitting calmly as if nothing had happened. "Juliet, don't leave angry," Patricia pleaded. "Let's work this out. Frank didn't mean any harm." "Didn't mean any harm." Juliet's voice broke. "He hit my daughter, Mom. He hit Emma. And instead of being horrified, instead of demanding he leave, you're making excuses for him." "I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Juliet laughed bitterly. "What's reasonable about any of this?" She turned to leave, but Frank's voice stopped her one more time. "Running away won't solve anything. That child needs discipline, and if you won't provide it, someone else will." Juliet turned back slowly, her eyes blazing with fury. "If you ever come near my daughter again, if you ever even look at her wrong, I will make you regret the day you were born." "Is that a threat?" Frank asked, seeming almost amused. "It's a promise," Juliet said quietly. "And if my own parents are going to side with someone who hits children, then maybe it's time I re-evaluated what family means." She headed for the door, Emma still in her arms, but Patricia's voice followed her. "Juliet, you're being dramatic. Children have been disciplined for generations. It's not the end of the world." Juliet stopped at the door and turned back one final time. "If you truly believe that what just happened was acceptable, then you're not the woman who raised me. The mother I knew would never have allowed anyone to hurt her granddaughter." "I'm still that woman," Patricia said, tears in her eyes. "I'm just trying to keep the peace." "By sacrificing your granddaughter's safety?" Juliet shook her head. "I'm done. Emma and I are leaving, and we won't be coming back until that man is gone, and you remember what it means to protect a child." As she walked out the door, she heard Patricia calling after her, heard Robert's voice raised in anger at Frank, heard Frank's calm voice responding with more justifications, but all she could focus on was Emma's small voice in her ear. "Mommy, why did he hit me? I was just trying to be good." And in that moment, Juliet made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't just leave. She wouldn't just stay away. She would make sure that what happened tonight had consequences that Frank Morrison would never forget. As she strapped Emma into her car seat, her hands still shaking with rage and adrenaline, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. David Chen, family attorney, the same lawyer who had helped her navigate her divorce 3 years ago. It was time to make some calls. The drive home from her parents' house passed in a blur of streetlights and Emma's quiet sniffles from the back seat. Juliet's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white, her mind racing between fury and disbelief at what had just transpired. Every few seconds, she glanced in the rearview mirror at Emma, who was holding her stuffed bunny close to her chest, occasionally touching the red mark on her cheek with cautious fingers. "Mommy, does my face look funny?" Emma asked in a small voice as they pulled into the driveway of their modest two-bedroom rental house on Maple Street. "No, sweetheart, you look beautiful, just like always," Juliet said, her voice deliberately gentle despite the storm raging inside her. "Let's get you inside and put some ice on your cheek, okay?" Their house was a far cry from the colonial elegance of her parents' home, but it was theirs. Juliet had worked 2 jobs to make sure she could provide a safe, stable environment for Emma after the divorce. The living room was small but cozy, filled with Emma's artwork taped to the walls and photographs of their little family of 2. It was a sanctuary, and right now, Juliet needed that sanctuary more than ever. "Can we have hot chocolate?" Emma asked, as Juliet helped her out of her purple dress and into her favorite pajamas, the ones with the unicorns that she'd gotten for her birthday. "Of course, baby, with extra marshmallows." Juliet's heart broke a little more at how quickly Emma was trying to return to normalcy. Children were resilient, but they shouldn't have to be. Not like this. As Emma settled on the couch with her hot chocolate and a gentle ice pack against her cheek, Juliet stepped into the kitchen and pulled out her phone. Her hands were still shaking as she scrolled through her contacts, looking for David Chen's number. It was nearly 8 p.m. on a Saturday night, but she knew David well enough to know he'd answer if it was important. The phone rang twice before David's familiar voice came through. "Juliet, everything okay? David, I need your help. Something happened tonight, and I need to know what my options are." "What kind of something? Are you and Emma safe?" "We're safe now, but..." Juliet took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "Emma and I went to my parents' house for dinner. My mother has been dating this man, Frank Morrison, and he hit Emma." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. "He hit her? How hard? Where?" "He slapped her across the face, hard enough to leave a mark." Juliet's voice cracked slightly. "She's 6, David. She was apologizing to him for being too loud during dinner, and he slapped her." "Jesus, Juliet, are you at the hospital? Have you documented the injury?" "We just got home. I took photos with my phone, but I haven't been to the hospital yet. Should I take her?" "Yes, absolutely. Even if the injury isn't severe, you need medical documentation, and you need to file a police report." "That's what I was hoping you'd say." Juliet felt some of her resolve solidify. "But David, there's more. My parents, they're defending him. My mother actually laughed when it happened." She laughed? Not immediately, but afterward, when I was screaming at him, she tried to minimize it. Said it wasn't that bad, that children need discipline, that I was being dramatic. Juliet's voice was bitter with the memory. "My own mother defended the man who hit her granddaughter. I'm sorry, Juliet. I know how much your family means to you. I thought I knew them. I thought I knew my parents." Juliet glanced toward the living room, where Emma was quietly sipping her hot chocolate and watching cartoons. "But seeing them tonight, I don't know who they are anymore." "Let's focus on what we can control," David said gently. "First, you need to get Emma to the emergency room. They'll document the injury and potentially contact child services, which is actually a good thing in this situation. Then, we file a police report for assault." "Assault? It was just a slap." "Juliet, any unwanted physical contact with a child by a non-parent is assault. It doesn't matter if it was a slap, a push, or a punch. He had no right to touch Emma, and certainly no right to hit her." "What about my parents? They were witnesses, but they're clearly not going to support my version of events. We'll deal with that when we get there. Right now, the most important thing is getting proper documentation and getting the legal process started." "How's Emma doing?" Juliet looked toward the living room again. Emma had curled up with her bunny, the ice pack balanced precariously on her cheek. "She's being so brave. too brave. She keeps asking if she did something wrong, if she was bad. That breaks my heart. No child should have to deal with that. David, I want to make sure this man faces consequences. I want to make sure he can't do this to another child. What are my options? Well, the criminal case will be handled by the prosecutor's office once you file the report. You can also pursue a civil case against him for assault and battery. If you want to be really aggressive, you could seek a restraining order to keep him away from both you and Emma. What about my parents? Can I legally keep them from seeing Emma if they're going to expose her to this man? David was quiet for a moment. That's more complicated. Grandparents do have some rights, but if you can prove that they're putting Emma in danger by allowing this man around her, you might have grounds to limit their visitation. It would be a difficult case, but not impossible. I can't believe I'm even having this conversation. Juliet felt tears threatening again. This morning, Emma was excited about seeing her grandparents. Now I'm talking about keeping her away from them. I know this is hard, Juliet, but you're doing the right thing. Protecting Emma is your first priority, and sometimes that means making difficult decisions about family. Will you represent me in whatever legal action we decide to take? Of course. I'll always be here for you and Emma. You know that. Thank you, David. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd figure it out. You're stronger than you know. Now let's get Emma to the hospital. I'll meet you there in an hour. After hanging up, Juliet sat in her kitchen for a moment, processing everything that had happened. 3 hours ago, she'd been a single mother looking forward to a family dinner. Now she was preparing to take legal action against a man who had assaulted her daughter, potentially facing a battle with her own parents in the process. "Mommy?" Emma's voice came from the living room. "Are we going somewhere else tonight?" "Yes, sweetheart. We need to go to the hospital so a doctor can look at your cheek." "Am I sick?" "No, baby. But when someone hurts you, even if it's just a little hurt, we need to make sure you're okay. And we need to tell some people what happened so they can help us." Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her bunny tucked under her arm. "Are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa again?" The question hit Juliet like a physical blow. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her grandparents chose to defend the man who hurt her? "I don't know, sweetheart. Right now, we need to focus on taking care of you and making sure you're safe. But I want to see them. Even if Mr. Frank was mean to me, I still love Grandma and Grandpa. I know you do, baby, and they love you too. But sometimes adults make bad choices, and we have to protect ourselves from those bad choices." Emma nodded solemnly, accepting the explanation with the faith that children have in their parents. "Okay, Mommy, I trust you." Those 4 words, "I trust you," hit Juliet harder than anything else that had happened that night. Emma trusted her to keep her safe, to make the right decisions, to protect her from harm, and Juliet had failed tonight. She'd brought Emma into a situation where she was hurt, where she was traumatized, where she learned that adults could be cruel for no reason. But she wouldn't fail again. As they drove to the hospital, Juliet's phone buzzed with text messages. The first was from her mother. "Juliet, please don't be angry. Frank feels terrible about what happened. He wants to apologize. Can we talk tomorrow?" The second was from her father. "Sweetheart, I know tonight was difficult. Your mother and I are working things out with Frank. Please call me when you're ready to talk." The third was from an unknown number, but Juliet suspected it was Frank. "Your daughter needed discipline. Running to lawyers won't change that. Some children need a firm hand." Juliet's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The fact that Frank had somehow gotten her phone number and felt entitled to text her about disciplining Emma was all the confirmation she needed that she was doing the right thing. At the hospital, Dr. Sarah Martinez, no relation despite the shared last name, was gentle and thorough in her examination of Emma. She photographed the injury, documented the redness and slight swelling, and asked Emma careful questions about what had happened. "The physical injury is minor," Dr. Martinez explained to Juliet as Emma colored in a book the nurse had given her. "But the emotional impact could be significant. I'd recommend follow-up with a child psychologist to help her process what happened." I'm already planning on that, Juliet replied. Doctor, I need to ask, as a mandated reporter, are you required to report this incident? Yes, I am. I'll be filing a report with Child Protective Services. But from what I can see, you're taking all the appropriate steps to protect Emma. The CPS worker will likely want to interview both of you, but this appears to be a clear case of assault by a non-family member. David arrived at the hospital just as Dr. Martinez was finishing her documentation. He brought with him a calm authority that helped steady Juliet's nerves. The police are on their way, he told her quietly. Officer Janet Reynolds will be taking your statement. She's experienced with cases involving children. Officer Reynolds arrived 20 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put Emma at ease. She conducted the interview in a family room at the hospital, with Emma sitting close to her mother and occasionally petting a therapy dog that the officer had brought with her. Emma, can you tell me what happened at Grandma and Grandpa's house tonight? Officer Reynolds asked gently. Emma's account was heartbreakingly clear. She described the dinner, Frank's growing anger, her attempts to apologize, and the moment he hit her. Her description was consistent, detailed, and delivered without prompting or leading questions. He said I was too loud, Emma concluded, touching her cheek again. But I was just excited about the cookies. I didn't mean to be bad. You weren't bad, sweetheart, Officer Reynolds assured her. Adults should never hit children, no matter what. You did nothing wrong. After the interview, Officer Reynolds spoke privately with Juliet and David. This is a clear case of assault. I'll be filing charges against Frank Morrison tonight. We'll need Mr. Morrison's full name and address. I don't know his address, Juliet realized. I only met him tonight. We can get that from your parents, David suggested. If they'll cooperate, Juliet said bitterly. They'll cooperate or they'll face potential charges as accessories, Officer Reynolds said firmly. Failure to report child abuse is a crime in Ohio. As they left the hospital at nearly midnight, Emma asleep in Juliet's arms, David walked them to their car. What happens next? Juliet asked. I'll file for an emergency restraining order first thing Monday morning. We'll keep Frank Morrison away from Emma legally. As for your parents, David paused. That's going to be more complicated. I keep thinking about my mother's face, Juliet said quietly. When Frank hit Emma, for just a split second I saw shock in her eyes, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. But then Frank started talking, started justifying it, and I watched her convince herself that it was okay. People can rationalize almost anything when they're emotionally invested in someone. But this is her granddaughter, David. How do you rationalize someone hurting your granddaughter? I don't know, Juliet. I honestly don't know. Back home, Juliet tucked Emma into bed, staying beside her until she fell asleep. Then she sat in her kitchen, staring at her phone and the messages that had continued to arrive throughout the evening. Her mother had texted 3 more times. Juliet, please don't do anything hasty. We can work this out as a family. Frank is really sorry. He knows he made a mistake. Can we please talk? Why aren't you answering your phone? I'm worried about you and Emma. Her father had called twice and left voicemails, his voice strained and tired. Sweetheart, your mother is very upset. I know tonight was difficult, but Frank has agreed to apologize to Emma. Can't we find a way to move past this? The second voicemail was different, quieter. Juliet, I've been thinking about what happened tonight. I keep seeing Emma's face when it happened. I think maybe we need to talk. Just you and me, without your mother or Frank. Call me when you're ready. But it was the final text message that made Juliet's blood run cold. It was from the unknown number again. Frank, I know you went to the hospital. I know you called the police. You're making a big mistake. That child needs discipline, and if you won't provide it, the courts will see that she needs a stronger hand. Don't push this. Juliet screenshot the message immediately and forwarded it to David with a note. He's threatening me and Emma. David's response came within minutes. Save everything. This just made our case much stronger. Try to get some sleep. We have a big day ahead of us. but sleep was impossible. Juliet found herself checking on Emma every hour, making sure she was breathing peacefully, making sure the door was locked, making sure they were safe. Every noise outside made her jump. Every car that drove by made her look out the window. At 3 a.m., her phone rang. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. "Mom?" "Juliet, thank God. I've been so worried. How is Emma?" "She's sleeping. She has a bruise on her face where your boyfriend hit her." "He's not my boyfriend anymore." Patricia's voice was thick with tears. "I told Frank to leave after you did. I told him what he did was wrong. After I left." "Mom, it was wrong when it happened. It was wrong the second his hand touched Emma's face." I know that now. I was just so shocked. And Frank was so calm about it, and he made it sound like it wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal, Mom. It was a huge deal. He assaulted your granddaughter. I'm sorry, Juliet. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I wanted the dinner to go well. I wanted everyone to get along. And when it started going badly, I just kept trying to fix it instead of protecting Emma. Juliet felt some of her anger begin to crack, revealing the hurt underneath. You chose him over her, Mom. In that moment when it mattered most, you chose to defend the man who hurt Emma instead of protecting her. I know, and I hate myself for it. I haven't stopped crying since you left. Your father is so angry with me, he's sleeping in the guest room. He says I failed as a grandmother tonight. Dad said that. He's right, I did fail. Emma needed me to protect her, and instead I made excuses for the man who hurt her. The raw pain in her mother's voice was genuine, and despite everything, Juliet felt her heart breaking for the woman who had raised her to be strong and independent. "Where's Frank now?" "Gone. I told him to leave and never come back. I told him if he ever tried to contact me again, I'd call the police myself. He's been texting me, Mom, threatening messages about Emma needing discipline." "What? Give me his number. I'll call him right now and tell him." "No, Mom, don't call him. Don't contact him at all. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. The police are handling it now." "The police? Juliet, please, can't we handle this privately? Frank's gone. I promise you he's gone. We don't need to involve the authorities." And there it was, the moment Juliet realized that despite her mother's tears and apologies, she still didn't fully understand the severity of what had happened. "Mom, a grown man assaulted my 6-year-old daughter. That's not something we handle privately. That's something we handle through the legal system. But the family—" "What family, Mom? The family where grandparents let strangers hit their grandchildren? The family where adults make excuses for child abuse? That family? We can fix this, sweetheart. We can be a family again. Maybe we can. But not until you understand that what happened tonight was unforgivable. Not until you understand that Emma's safety comes before anyone's feelings. Not until you prove that you choose her over anyone who might hurt her. I do choose her. I will choose her. Then prove it. When the police call you for Frank's information, you give it to them. When they ask you to testify about what you saw, you tell the truth. When the prosecutor needs your cooperation, you cooperate. You prove that you choose Emma by helping us make sure Frank Morrison faces consequences for what he did. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," she finally whispered. "Okay, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'll help you make this right. And Mom, if you ever, and I mean ever, bring someone around Emma who might hurt her, if you ever choose anyone over her safety again, you will lose us forever. Do you understand?" "I understand. It will never happen again. I promise you, Juliet, it will never happen again." After hanging up, Juliet sat in her kitchen and cried. For Emma, for the family dinner that had turned into a nightmare, for the trust that had been broken, and for the long road ahead. But underneath the tears was something else. Determination. Frank Morrison had made a mistake when he hit Emma. He'd made an even bigger mistake when he'd threatened them afterward. And he was about to learn that Juliet Martinez was not a woman who backed down when her daughter was threatened. Tomorrow, she would file for that restraining order. She would pursue every legal avenue available to her. She would make sure Frank Morrison faced consequences not just for what he'd done, but for who he'd revealed himself to be. Because Emma deserved better. Emma deserved a world where adults protected children instead of hurting them. And if Juliet had to fight the legal system, her own family, and Frank Morrison himself to create that world for her daughter, then that's exactly what she would do. 3 months later, Juliet sat in the Millbrook County Courthouse, watching as Frank Morrison was led away in handcuffs. The judge had just sentenced him to 6 months in jail and 2 years of probation for assault on a minor, along with mandatory anger management classes and a permanent restraining order keeping him away from Emma and her family. The journey to this moment had been longer and more difficult than Juliet could have imagined, but seeing Frank's smug expression finally crack as the bailiff placed handcuffs on his wrists made every sleepless night and every legal fee worth it. "How do you feel?" David Chen asked as they watched Frank disappear through the courthouse doors. "Like I can finally breathe again," Juliet replied honestly. Emma, now 7 years old and sitting beside her mother, looked up with bright eyes. "Mommy, does this mean the mean man can't hurt any more kids?" "That's right, baby. He can't hurt you or any other children." Emma nodded solemnly, then returned to the coloring book that had kept her occupied during the sentencing hearing. Dr. Susan Walsh, the child psychologist who had been working with Emma since the incident, had recommended that Emma be present for the sentencing as part of her healing process, to see that adults who hurt children face consequences. The 3 months following that terrible dinner had tested every relationship in Juliet's life. True to her word, Patricia had cooperated fully with the police investigation, providing Frank's address and contact information and giving a statement that corroborated Emma's account of the assault. But the process had been devastating for the family. Frank had initially tried to fight the charges, hiring an expensive lawyer who argued that what happened was merely old-fashioned discipline and that Juliet was an overprotective single mother trying to destroy a good man's reputation. The lawyer had even suggested that Emma was lying or exaggerating what had happened. That strategy had backfired spectacularly when the prosecutor played the recording of Frank's threatening text messages in court. The jury had been visibly disturbed by his words about Emma needing a stronger hand, and his warning that the courts will see that she needs discipline. Those messages showed his true character, Prosecutor Maria Santos explained to Juliet after the verdict. A man who was truly sorry for a momentary lapse in judgment doesn't send threatening messages to the mother of the child he hurt. Those texts proved this wasn't about discipline, it was about control and intimidation. The civil case had been even more satisfying. David had argued that Frank's assault had caused not only physical harm, but significant emotional trauma to Emma, requiring ongoing therapy and affecting her sense of safety and trust in adults. The jury had awarded them $75,000 in damages, money that Juliet had immediately placed in a college fund for Emma. But perhaps the most important victory had come just last week, when Emma had finally stopped asking if she had been bad the night Frank hit her. Dr. Walsh had worked patiently with Emma to help her understand that what happened wasn't her fault, that adults who hurt children are the ones with the problem, not the children themselves. Emma's resilience has been remarkable, Dr. Walsh had told Juliet during their last session. Children have an incredible capacity for healing when they have strong support systems. You've created exactly the kind of environment she needed to process this trauma. The relationship with Juliet's parents had been more complicated to repair. Patricia had sunk into a deep depression after the incident, unable to forgive herself for choosing Frank over Emma's safety. She'd started therapy of her own, working through why she'd been so willing to rationalize Frank's behavior and compromise her granddaughter's well-being. "I think I was so desperate to not be alone," Patricia had explained during one of their first conversations after the trial began. "After your father retired, after you moved out and started your own life, I felt invisible. Frank made me feel important again, like I mattered. And when things started going wrong, I was more afraid of losing that feeling than I was protective of Emma. But Emma should have mattered more," Juliet had replied. "She should have been your first priority." You're absolutely right, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows she's my priority now. Robert had struggled with his own guilt about not intervening more forcefully when Frank hit Emma. I should have physically thrown him out of the house the second he touched her, he'd told Juliet. I was so shocked that I just stood there like a deer in headlights. What kind of grandfather does that make me? The healing process had been slow, involving family therapy sessions where everyone worked through their feelings about what had happened. Emma, with the straightforward honesty of a child, had been the one to eventually break through the adult's complicated emotions. I forgive you, Grandma and Grandpa, she'd announced during one session. But if anyone ever hits me again, you have to protect me right away, okay? Not later, right away. Right away, Patricia had promised through tears. I will protect you right away, every time. The trial had also had unexpected consequences for Frank Morrison beyond his criminal conviction. His employer, a local construction company, had fired him after news of his assault on a child became public. His ex-wife had come forward with stories of his controlling behavior during their marriage, painting a picture of a man with a pattern of intimidating those weaker than himself. Most satisfying to Juliet, several other women in the community had reached out to share their own experiences with Frank's inappropriate behavior around their children. While none of the incidents had risen to the level of physical assault, they painted a picture of a man who clearly had issues with appropriate boundaries around children. You probably saved other kids from what Emma went through, one mother had told Juliet. My daughter always said Frank made her uncomfortable at community events, but I thought she was just being dramatic. After hearing what happened to Emma, I realized I should have trusted her instincts. Now, standing outside the courthouse with Emma skipping beside her and David gathering his legal papers, Juliet felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Justice had been served, but more importantly, Emma was healing, and their family was stronger than ever. "Mommy, can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Emma asked, her face bright with the resilience that had amazed everyone who worked with her. "I think that's a perfect idea," Juliet laughed. "What flavor are you thinking? Chocolate chip cookie dough? And can we call Grandma and Grandpa and ask if they want to come too?" The fact that Emma wanted to include her grandparents in the celebration spoke to the work they'd all done to rebuild their relationships. Patricia and Robert had spent the last 3 months proving their commitment to Emma's safety and well-being, and slowly, trust had been rebuilt. "I think they'd love that," Juliet said, pulling out her phone. Patricia answered on the first ring. "How did it go?" "He got 6 months in jail and 2 years probation. It's over, Mom." "Oh, thank God. How's Emma?" "She wants to celebrate with ice cream, and she wants you and Dad to come with us." Patricia's voice broke with emotion. "We'll be there in 10 minutes. As they waited for her parents, Emma tugged on Juliet's sleeve. "Mommy, I have a question." "What's that, sweetheart?" "When I'm a mommy someday, and if anyone is ever mean to my kids, will you help me protect them like you protected me?" Juliet knelt down to Emma's level, looking into her daughter's bright, trusting eyes. "Emma, I will help you protect your children, and I will help you be the kind of mother who always puts her kids first. And do you know what the most important thing is?" "What?" "You already learned the most important lesson. You learned that when someone hurts a child, you don't make excuses for them. You don't try to keep the peace. You protect the child no matter what. You're going to be an amazing mother someday because you already understand what matters most." Emma nodded seriously, then brightened. "Can I tell my kids about today? About how you made sure the mean man got in trouble for hitting me?" "Absolutely. You can tell them that sometimes adults make terrible choices, but there are always other adults who will fight to keep children safe. You can tell them that your mommy loved you so much that she was willing to fight anyone who tried to hurt you. Even family? Especially family, because the people who love you the most should be the ones who protect you the most." When Patricia and Robert arrived at the ice cream shop, the reunion was emotional but healing. Patricia had lost weight during the stressful months of the trial, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. Robert looked older but more determined, as if he'd rediscovered his role as a protector. "I'm so proud of you. Patricia told Juliet, as Emma excitedly told her grandparents about the trial and the mean man going to jail. "You did what I should have done that night." "You put Emma first?" "We all put Emma first now," Juliet replied. "That's what matters." "Does this mean we can have normal family dinners again?" Emma asked, chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream smeared around her mouth. The adults looked at each other and laughed, the first genuine laughter they'd shared as a family since that terrible October night. "Yes, sweetheart," Patricia said, reaching over to wipe ice cream from Emma's face. "We can have normal family dinners, with just us, just our family. And if anyone is ever mean to me again, then Grandma and Grandpa will protect you right away," Robert said firmly. "No questions asked, no excuses made. Right away." Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned to her ice cream. The adults sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching her enjoy her treat with the carefree abandon that children should be able to experience. "I have something to tell you all," Juliet said finally. "David and I have been talking about starting a foundation." "What kind of foundation?" Patricia asked. "For families dealing with child assault cases, legal aid, therapy resources, support groups." Emma isn't the only child who's been hurt by adults who think they have the right to discipline other people's kids, and not every family has the resources to fight back the way we did. "That's a wonderful idea," Robert said. "What would you call it?" Juliet looked at Emma, who was now drawing pictures with her finger in the condensation on her ice cream cup. "Emma's Voice Foundation, because every child deserves to have their voice heard when someone hurts them." Emma looked up at the mention of her name. "Is that for me?" "It's for all the kids like you, baby. Kids who get hurt and need grown-ups to believe them and protect them. Can I help? When you're older, if you want to. But for now, you just focus on being a kid." Emma nodded and returned to her drawing, but not before adding, "I think helping other kids is important because everyone deserves to be safe." As they walked back to their cars, Emma skipping between her mother and grandparents, Juliet reflected on how much their lives had changed since that terrible dinner. The trauma had been real and lasting, but so had the growth that came from facing it head-on. Emma had learned that adults weren't perfect, but that the adults who truly loved her would always fight for her. Patricia and Robert had learned that love without action was meaningless, and that protecting children sometimes meant making difficult choices about other adults. And Juliet had learned that her fierce protective instincts were not something to apologize for. They were exactly what Emma needed from her mother. "Mommy," Emma said as they reached their car, "I'm glad you called the lawyer that night." "Why's that, sweetheart?" "Because now other mommies will know they can call lawyers too if someone hurts their kids, and the mean people will know that kids have people who will fight for them." Juliet hugged her daughter tight, marveling at the wisdom that could come from such a young person who had faced something so difficult. "That's right, baby. Kids will always have people who will fight for them, no matter what." As they drove home through the streets of Millbrook, Emma chattering excitedly about starting second grade and her upcoming dance recital, Juliet felt something she hadn't experienced since that terrible October night. Complete peace of mind. Frank Morrison was in jail, where he couldn't hurt any more children. Her family had learned hard lessons about priorities and protection. Emma was healing and thriving with a support system that had been tested and proven strong. Most importantly, Emma knew without any doubt that she was loved, protected, and valued. She knew that her voice mattered, that her safety came first, and that the adults in her life would move heaven and earth to keep her from harm. It had taken a lawsuit, a criminal trial, months of therapy, and the near destruction of family relationships to get to this point. But as Emma laughed in the back seat and planned their next family dinner, Juliet knew that every difficult moment had been worth it. Because Emma was safe, Emma was loved, and Emma knew that she would always have someone fighting in her corner. That was worth everything.